Hello again, and welcome to episode 10 of Smarks Without Attitude. And today's episode, we will be discussing the Montreal Screwjob because we've just come up to the 20-year anniversary of the incredibly famous Montreal Screwjob, and
You know, I'm going to be really anal and say it's not an anniversary because, you know, you do the WWE thing where it's like, it's the 20th anniversary at WrestleMania 20. It's like you don't celebrate your first year as an anniversary.
okay, it was 20 years ago that it happened.
Yeah, sorry, I know there'll be troll cunts who'll be like, it's not 20 years.
Yeah, you're right. Like same as WrestleMania 31 was the 30th anniversary of WrestleMania.
Exactly. Sorry, again, there'll be troll cunts.
Okay, in that case, it is the 20th. In that case, it's
20 years ago.
and yeah, so it's still talked about now. If you went on to Twitter or any message board, there's still people talking about it. It's something that's been very huge in wrestling and wrestling history and shaped an awful lot of what went on post 97 in both WWE and WCW.
Not to hyperbole it, but it is the most infamous conclusion to a match in North American wrestling history. I won't go into Japan because obviously they've got their own set of screw jobs.
Well, their screw jobs tend to be more someone beating someone to an absolute pulp as opposed
That's
to
it.
pretending that someone's submitted. Pretending someone's submitted because of their own dodgy booking decisions, we should say. But so Montreal. How do we get to Montreal? And we'll need to go on that journey. What the build? What happened before Survivor Series 1997 in Montreal? Was it in the Bell Centre?
I don't know, to be honest, man. Funny enough, I've done all this research and I've had a blast reading and all the interviews and stuff, and I was stupid enough not to see what arena it was based in.
Must have been
We'll edit that.
It's called the Bell Centre now, but yeah. Yeah, well, Harry, take us away.
Okay, folks. It's the fallout of the Hulkamania era with a sex and steroid scandal, and Vince McMahon is desperately trying to rebuild his empire in a way that wouldn't court controversy and, importantly, get back those viewers who stopped watching wrestling. As such, his first decision was to create a new WWF champion, one that had a clean slate and one those pesky reporters and governing bodies couldn't link to the muscle men of the 80s. Enter Bret Hitman Hart. Hot off the heels of a massively successful Summerslam here in the UK, which saw the WWF draw its legitimate largest gate in history at that point, in part thanks to Hart defending and then losing the WWF Intercontinental title to brother-in-law and the UK's own British Bulldog. Did you see that show?
And Crack Addict.
And Crack Addict. Oh, allegedly.
Well, Brett says it in his book and in shoot interviews.
And to be fair, Hart wrote every fucking detail down. His book, I mean, I was going to get to that at the end. If you've never read Bret Hart's book, do so, although you will fall out of love with him because of the some of the things he's done. But he did write down everything like fucking meticulously.
Yeah, well, and also the fact that it's revealed in the book that even during the time what you said when Vince was looking for someone who was not on steroids, he did take steroids.
Exactly that. That's actually got to my point. In October 1992, Hart defeated outgoing Ric Flair to win his first WWF Championship at an untelevised house show because that was a thing back then.
Recorded, wasn't it?
It was recorded, but it wasn't. It wasn't like they didn't have Raw back then, or did they?
No.
No, they didn't. So it was just shown on a Wrestling Challenge.
Saskatoon, wasn't it? I believe in Canada.
Yes, it was. That's right. Whereas previous babyface champions of the last decade were larger in life in every sense, the smaller, in absolute loosest terms, there's that word, Hart fit the bill of what McMahon was looking for to re-establish his brand. An actual wrestler, not jacked to the gills. Of course, the hilarious part is that Hart was never truly the chosen one to lead the WWF in its new era. McMahon's first choice, not including Hogan, apparently the WrestleMania 9 planning was always going to be just as intended, despite Hart being told otherwise. Did you know that?
What, it was always going to be Hogan leaving as champion?
Yes, no, it was always going to be Hogan winning the belt at WrestleMania and then jobbing it back to Yokozuna.
Yeah.
It was never, I mean, I think Hart felt like he was supposed to be passed the torch, but I don't think that was ever the plan for whatever reason.
Hart says that the photographs for him against Hogan at King of the Ring were made.
but they never raise it as an actual thing. And as harsh as it is, McMahon is known to splooge money just to throw people off the track, I suppose. Even though there was barely anything back then in terms of like proper dirt sheets.
He was led to believe that he would be getting the belt off of Hogan.
Anyway, McMahon's first choice was obviously a throwback to the previous era in super jacked Lex Luger.
Yeah.
Ooh, the strapping Luger, having spent the first year of as in the WWF as a commentator on the World Bodybuilding Federation. Do you want to do that, Reece, one day? Look at the World Bodybuilding Federation?
No.
Gary Stridham, wow! Sorry, that's probably sounding really bad. He then joined the WWF as the Narcissist before a face turn transformed Luger into a diet version of Hogan, replacing beach puns with a tour bus and the red and yellow with stars and stripes.
What was the name of the tour bus?
The Lex Express.
Lex Express.
It did give us Russo's one of his best ever put downs. I'm so glad you survived the car crash. That was the Lex Express.
Yeah, that was actually pretty good.
The experiment infamously culminated in a match which saw Luger unsuccessfully win the WWF title from then champion Yokozuna at SummerSlam 1993, in which, if he didn't win the title, would not receive a rematch. Regardless, Luger won via countout and still received the champion's victory celebration with balloons and several faces celebrating with him.
Count out that he was pretty happy to get as well. He didn't go and try and get him back in the ring or anything. It's so weird.
I know, it's just poorly booked. At some point, McMahon came to his senses, possibly due to falling merch sales and Luger's star fading, thanks to his attempts at shoving Luger down the audience's throat. Where have we heard that before, Reece?
Mm.
And by WrestleMania 10, despite Hart losing earlier in the night against younger brother Owen in one of Mania's greatest ever matches, Hart beat Yokozuna later in the night for his second WWF title.
Yeah, do you reckon they did the Luger Hart Royal Rumble finish where they both hit the deck at the same time?
Yes.
Was that an actual mistake, or did they do that on purpose, or try to do it on purpose, so that Vince could afford himself the time up until WrestleMania to go with Lex or not?
I think I've heard that it was literally a case of they wanted both options available, to the point of even on the show as well.
It's not like the clear mistake that was John Cena and Batista when Vince actually had to come out and tell them what to do in the ring and tear his quad.
I was literally about to say and cripple himself in the process.
Oh, it's so embarrassing.
I think it was a case of he wanted to have his cake and eat it and wanted to have the options of both. I think just in case the off chance Luger persevered with the audience.
Yeah.
Anyway, we roll on to experiment number 2. Diesel, Big Daddy Cool, or Kevin Nash. After Hart lost his second WWF title to Bob Backlund, duck-ass himself.
Mm.
Do you remember that? It's the throw in the towel match.
Yeah.
And Owen's like, I did it! I cost Brett the WWF title! Woo!
Doesn't he talk their mum, Martha? No, is it Martha? No, his wife's Martha. Don't they talk their mum into throwing the towel?
No, his mum is Martha. His wife was Julie, I
No,
think.
Julie was Brett's wife.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. Absolutely right. Sorry. It's, oh, Christ. It's Stu Hart and... Oh, my God, I don't know. Mrs. Hart. Just say that for now. Sorry, I was going to say, Diesel beat Backlund 3 days later in 8 seconds.
Yeah, house show, MSG.
Another house show, yep. What followed was one of the longest world title reigns of that decade. Whilst Nash never had the roidy goods that helped Hogan's stars shine, he was a legit 7-foot giant, and in the land of the giants, that does help. Despite his size, Diesel was once again hampered by Vince's booking, continuing to shove the character down the throats of the audience, which only grew more resentment as his near-year-long title reign continued.
Was he the worst drawing champion in WWF history?
Yes, officially, I believe. Although Michaels wasn't much better, but we'll get to that.
If you watch it back, it really is a bad period for. I mean, I've always feel sorry for Nash and for the Diesel character because he's obviously like the character is such a heel. It's a heel character, and it's you don't play the Diesel character as a face, and it's just so forced, and you can tell he doesn't really. I don't think he particularly liked playing it as a face.
No, I think it's been confirmed in interviews he didn't want to do it anyway.
And the actual his opposition. I mean, what was it? Was it a SummerSlam when he went up against Mabel?
Oh, and he nearly killed him.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, terrible.
It is. At the 1995 Survivor Series, Hart was once again thrust into salvaging the title scene, ending Diesel's reign and maybe, finally, being allowed to lead the company for an extended period.
That was a wonderful match.
It was. Unfortunately, though, he had 5 months because Experiment 3 was ready for the limelight, which was, of course, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels.
That was one of the first matches to feature a very prominent table spot, wasn't it?
The match between Diesel and Hart.
Still in Survivor Series when he pushes him off the apron into the commentators' table.
I don't remember, man. I'll have to
It was
rewatch that
quite,
one.
I think it was quite unheard of at the time.
I'll have to rewatch that.
Obviously, people went through tables and stuff because you can just think of when Funk put Flair through a table when he was supposed to retire. That that was a thing. But in the WWF, being flung off the apron into the commentators' table wasn't very common at that time.
Yeah, it was very cookie cutter. It was the only gimmicks they had was, I mean, they only introduced the ladder match in 1992, but before that it was just cage matches.
And whose idea was that?
That was, I don't know. Go on, tell me.
Whose idea was a ladder match?
Yeah, was it Michaels? Was it Brett?
The first ever WWF ladder match was Michaels and Bret Hart as like a tester.
That I do know. Yeah, 1992.
I think they did it at a house show, but I think it was on Smash and Whack 'em or whatever that video was called, which I did have somewhere.
That is a fucking throwback.
But then after that, McMahon went with Michaels and Razor as the actual big ladder match feud instead of letting Hart continue it.
Very strange. I didn't know. I did know that they definitely had the first one, but I didn't know that they didn't actually show it on television. But they did include it on a cassette release.
Hart's baby.
Michaels, Shawn Michaels. He was like Brett. He started off as a tag team competitor in the 80s, having crafted into a legitimate singles competitor. Had WrestleMania 11 not been headlined between... Do you remember who was the headline at WrestleMania 11?
Bam Bam Bigelow and NFL star Lawrence Taylor.
In a match that every NFL commentator said this will ruin Taylor's Hall of Fame credentials. They wanted nothing to do with wrestling.
I'm fairly sure the match goes down in history as Lawrence Taylor did okay.
Yeah, exactly, but...
Seriously, right? And he did the best he could, and which, it wasn't terrible.
No, exactly. Could have been 100 times worse. But that's not really much of a big push-up to say, oh, the match was okay. It could have been so much worse.
Bam Bam Bigelow has main evented a WrestleMania, and CM Punk hasn't.
That's strange. That is a very strange... That is strange, isn't it?
Mm.
But Phil would be happy. Where was I? Michaels would have main evented the show by winning the most obvious Royal Rumble in history. I think we've mentioned this, where they mention constantly on the commentary, both feet must touch the ground, and it's like, why'd you keep saying that? And at the end, it's like, Michaels has been eliminated. Oh, wait, he's got one foot on the ground, and Davey Boy celebrate. Oh, he's gone. And he's gone.
And that was Michael's idea to do that finish, and Vince fought him all the way until I believe Michaels, this could be wrong, but I think it just got to the point where Michaels went, you know what, I'm doing it. And Vince was really scared that he would do the spot
and fuck it up.
Slippery from like an hour's worth of wrestling and sweaty and all that, and that he'd fuck it up. But really, Royal Rumble spots, it's one of the best.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The only reason it was ruined is because the commentary kept going on and on about it.
Yeah, the whole 2 feet. Yeah.
If they mentioned it just once in the actual when Finkel does his little rules, that's all they needed.
Yeah.
But they kept mentioning it throughout the show, going both feet. But anyway,
it was the Rumble that McMahon won when they really made the big deal that McMahon and Austin both went under the ropes when they went missing for 30 minutes.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. They're not eliminated yet. Good old Cole.
Mm.
Do you know why Taylor and Bigelow ended up headlining that WrestleMania? Apart from the fact that the business was in a bit of a downward spiral at this point.
I'm going to guess it was just because McMahon wanted as many eyes on WrestleMania as he could because of how bad the business was.
That's mostly true, but also he legitimately didn't believe that Diesel and Michaels could sell out a Mania, which is quite disheartening, really, especially considering the Click's influence on the product at that point.
It was 1995, right?
It is 95.
Yeah, I mean, not being funny, but Diesel and 1995 version of Shawn Michaels wasn't a WrestleMania main event, was it?
No, exactly. But 1996 happened, and things had changed. Vince decided to go all out with the wrestling side and made HBK's journey conclude with a match with Hart in a 60-minute Iron Man match at WrestleMania 12.
I remember being so excited for this match.
I'm glad you said that because I'll be brutally honest. There was going to be a question later on about when you first heard of the Screwjob, which was much. I didn't watch wrestling properly until WrestleMania 14. So
Mm,
I watched an abridged package version of the this match.
yeah,
It was about 20 minutes long, and I was bored watching that. Rewatching it again just to see if it was any different. I think this is such a poor match.
it's such. I watched it. I watched it on the Monday um, after school, I believe, because Sky back in the day,
It was still on Sky Sports, weren't it? So you could watch, you could tape it and then watch it the following night.
and definitely these were definitely the days where no pay per view for us if you had Sky,
Yeah.
and I think they used to do a replay at about 6 p.m. on the Monday. So if you didn't tape it, I just used to watch it. The only thing with that is you used to get
Yeah, they did that up until they started doing Sky box office. They used to
yeah,
show it at like 9 o'clock on like Sky Sports 3 or something. If there was basically a gap in the schedule, which they always did have at the time.
you had adverts, but it was still
Yeah, that's how I caught up. Here's a funny thing. I got bored in 2000, and the one pay per view I didn't tape live was Judgment Day 2000, and I'm such a massive Undertaker fan, and it was the fucking show he returned at, and I had to retape it and watch it just to see him return again. So I
that
used that opportunity to tape it.
the other Iron Man match,
Yeah, it's exactly very strange little.
and actually an actual entertaining Iron Man match as well.
Oh yes, which gets me to this point. What should have been on paper an all-time classic was a plodding hour with barely any heat. Not helping was the match reaching a draw with no pinfalls and having to go to overtime, with Michaels finally winning his first WWF title. From there, HBK would lead the WWF whilst Hart went on sabbatical, his first major break in years, to decide on his future.
An hour with no pinfalls.
That poor crowd.
As a child, I remember watching it in its entirety and being bored. And the last 5 minutes of it is quite entertaining, obviously, because it's a sudden death.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But you watch it back now, and obviously, technically, it's a very good match. Probably too technical. Um, the WrestleMania as a whole is incredibly shallow. Hence why they had to give this main event an hour.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you had the OJ Simpson ripoff, which was during it. You had Warrior's Return, where he jobs out Triple H in
About 12
20
seconds.
and
Yeah.
eats a pedigree. You had Taker and Diesel, which went on for fucking forever.
I don't remember hating that match, but yeah.
I think Diesel hits him with 3 jackknives and could win the match at any moment. He just doesn't pin him, and then Taker finally beats him at the end.
Yeah, no Ramon on that. No Razor Ramon on that pay per view because he'd been suspended because him and Nash had actually given their note. Oh no, sorry, he'd given his notice
Yes.
prior to this. I don't know if Nash had, but Razor had definitely given his notice.
Yes, exactly. That was exactly the point. So he was punished by not getting a payday.
Austin made his WrestleMania debut, I believe, on this as well against Savio Vega.
Yes, I think he did. He was still transitioning between Ringmaster and his future Stone Cold character.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't a great WrestleMania, and
No, it wasn't.
you could say that the personal rivalry between Hart and Michaels in terms of their personal dislike for each other. Because I mean, obviously hindsight and whatnot, you can choose to believe or not. But Bret Hart does often say that he respected Michaels as an athlete, um, and Michaels has since said that Hart was a bit of a hero to him, obviously as a wrestler. Um, but there's a lot of instances in this match where they're clearly potatoing the fuck out of each other. I mean, that kick, the one where he kicks the timekeeper,
Yeah.
when obviously Hart's sitting on the timekeeper's lap, and he absolutely smashes the timekeeper with a Sweet Chin Music. And then I think there's a few stiff shots after that, and obviously the match culminates with Michaels wins, and he tells Hebner to tell Hart to get the fuck out of his ring, and you can actually see when you watch that match back, or if you watch the last 30 seconds of the match, you can actually see the moment when Hebner tells him, and Hart's face kind of drops, like he feels disrespected.
I'm glad you phrased that. There was actually something I wanted to raise about that later. There might be a bit of contention towards that.
Yeah, but that's often cited as one of the big
Catalyst for it going personal.
catalysts, yeah, for their personal issues. So yeah,
In 1996, Michael saw his world title reign largely stagnate, with feuds against the British Bulldog, which had the affair thing in it,
and the double.
And that exactly that. A Potato Factory with Vader, which saw HBK's more childish outbursts, and the newly signed Mankind.
The feud with the Bulldog had the really odd, had that angle, didn't it, where they basically were calling. I think did they actually call him a homo? They were calling him gay. I mean, the subtext was basically, "You're horrible. You've posed naked in women's magazines, so we think you're a bit gay." Um, he may or may not have had an affair. No, it wasn't an affair, was it? Wasn't it more sexual harassment?
Yes, against Diana Hart, I
Diana
think.
Hart, the most stern-faced woman in the whole of wrestling history, quite.
She looks like she hates everything about wrestling.
Yeah, at least like Wembley '92, she perked up a little bit towards the end, and her involvement added to the match between Hart and Davey Boy. But yeah, you can tell she doesn't want to be involved in this feud at all. And it wasn't actually terrible, if I remember correctly. I think they had two matches, one of which ended with the both shoulders on the mat.
Yeah, that's right. I think now you've said that. I don't know if is that Beware of Dog 2?
There was Beware of Dog, that was one of them. I can't.
Yeah, that was the thing. That was the first match, and then the rematches. It must be 2, obviously, because they have the same title.
Yeah.
Well, did you ever see his matches against Vader and Mankind?
Yeah, I was a very big wrestling fan at this point. I think this is when I think 95, I think 96 was when we first got Sky. So I think my first proper WrestleMania was WrestleMania 12 and the rest of 96.
Hmm.
SummerSlam 96 was the first pay per view I actually stayed up to watch at 12 o'clock at night.
Oh, jeez. So Vader.
Yeah, and I remember because I had the Boiler and Brawl, had Vader, had a couple of other decent matches, if I remember correctly. I can't. Owen Hart. Actually, I think Owen Hart beat Savio Vega by. Remember when Owen Hart had the cast for a little while?
Yeah, that's right.
Beat Savio Vega. I can't remember much else of it off the top of my head, but I remember the Vader and Michaels match. I remember genuinely thinking that Vader would win. I remember genuinely being surprised that Michaels won with the moonsault, and I just
He was going to win up until
yeah.
a few when he started complaining that he was too stiff, and then actually did bollock him during the match.
Well, the thing where he doesn't get up or he misses that spot and he kicks him in the head, and you can hear him shout at him quite clearly. Yeah,
That's right. Did you know Vader was quite upset with that as well?
yeah. I've got all the shoot interviews with Vader where he talks about that.
And the sad part is Vader agrees with him because he says, Michaels has been on the road all the time, and there's meat potato in him, and obviously he doesn't want to get injured and stuff. No wonder he gets up like angry about it. So it's very understanding, Vader, about it.
Yeah, and it was just to be clear, the Bulldog feud was it was the Beware of Dog match, and then they had the big 6-man tag at the International Incident.
Oh God, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Remember when Ahmed Johnson, Shawn Michaels, and Psycho Sid were the three? They tagged their little stable for a couple of months.
That's right. Ahmed Johnson. Sorry, I find him very humorous.
Yeah, and also Mind Games was so Vader was SummerSlam '96, and
Hmm.
I believe that feud was supposed to go on until Survivor Series '96, but that's when they switched it to Sid because he was getting.
Exactly that. Yep.
But the Mind Game, so the Michaels Mankind match is actually fantastic.
Yes, it was. Like Mankind had a hell of a '96, considering he was basically signed like, "Oh, we finally got you an opponent who can wrestle, Taker. Stop complaining about us giving you all these terrible guys who can't wrestle. We got you the one guy who you can wrestle against."
Yeah,
But he was so good in that match. He basically did what Foley always does, which is basically bump like a boss and take so much
I
punishment.
don't know. I think Cactus Jack as a character was quite. There was a slight psychological edge to it when that he was like so dangerous that it was hard. If you can't really scare a man with pain, then how do you beat him? I think wasn't that the shtick of with Cactus Jack. Whereas Mankind was, I think it was really really good character work. And actually, when you watch back now at the first iteration of Mankind, not the shirt wearing, sock wielding version, the comedy kind of version. The
Yeah,
fake
it's where he's got the brown overalls. He's pulling his hair out of his head, and he's like, screaming like a chicken. Undertaker.
Foley doesn't get into his characters. He's so good. Yeah, this
Yeah,
match
no,
and this match with Michaels at Mind Games, in your house, Mind Games, was quite. Yeah, it was really good. Really, quite a psychological match.
it was.
Hmm.
We get to our next point, in case anyone thought we were going to skip it. Earlier in the year, Michaels managed to upset a number of wrestlers and agents backstage by performing a curtain call with Click Buddies, Hall, Nash, and newly signed Triple H at Madison Square Garden. Despite approval by McMahon, he backpedaled due to the reaction and punished both guys, still staying with the company, taking away Triple H's planned King of the Ring victory and handing it to Stone Cold Steve Austin, culminating in one of wrestling's happier accidents, whilst the pair were told their summer program was now off. So did you know that the actual summer plan at the point was Triple H versus Michaels?
I did know that, and yeah, that's he was in the doghouse for a while, wasn't he? Oh, Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
He was, but he received some advice from I think Jim Cornette, who basically said, "Just ride. You're young. They'll forget," which they did. But we'll get to the fallout of Triple H later on and how his career took a bit of an upturn.
Mm.
During Hart's break, he was approached by WCW boss Eric Bischoff with an offer, a 3-year deal at $2.8 million a year. The plan was simple. Bischoff had created the hottest wrestling angle in America with the New World Order, a group of largely ex-WWF stars attempting a hostile takeover of WCW. He had Hogan, he had Hall, he had Nash, so why not Hart?
Did he have the 1-2-3 kid by this time?
I'm not sure. It was quite soon after this, though, if it wasn't.
Yeah.
Or 6, as he was called, because 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. And he was the 6th member.
Fucking hell.
Oh, I don't make these fucking things up, do I?
Who was the fourth
It was evil referee Nick Patrick.
member? No, I believe it was Ted DiBiase.
Oh, fuck. No, hold on. Because they promised it at the very first pay-per-view following. They said, we have rumours to believe that it was... that we've got a new recruit for the NWO. And I swear it was a case of Patrick did like a fucking weird fast count and no one clocked onto it until months and months later.
Ted DiBiase's in the crowd.
Oh, does he put 4 up and he's like, oh, he's a billionaire?
4 up. It's kind of revealed that he's the one banking them.
I tell you what, because you actually did watch WCW back then, I will take your word for it and say it was DiBiase. I'm prepared to not. I'm not going to fight for this point to say that the evil referee was 4.
Rick Rude was a little bit involved as well.
Although wasn't he still in WWF at this point?
He did the thing though, didn't he? After actually no, because I believe the Montreal Screwjob was part of the reason he fucked off to Nitro, wasn't
Yes, so we can cover that when we get to it. Vince's counteroffer. What was Vince's counteroffer, Reece?
Wasn't it a lifetime contract of 20 years at $750 a year? Is that that's
double that, man? 20-year contract, $1.5 million. And bear in mind, at this point, the WWF infamously didn't really have guaranteed contracts, which pissed a lot of people off.
Infamous thing that he did not do that.
Yeah. It basically guaranteed that Hart would be the highest paid wrestler in the company, and he would get a guaranteed backstage role once he retired. And Hart was 39 at this point and didn't really want to leave the WWF, so naturally he stuck with that deal.
Well, he's got family there, right?
Owen obviously, Neidhart. Yes, exactly that. And Pillman and the friends, and obviously been there for years at this point. Now, depending on where you hear it, this deal created a major friction between Hart and Michaels. Here we go. The pair had earlier attempted to work the boys in the back, with Michaels telling Hart to leave the ring at Mania 12 during his celebration, but this was done to create interest in a rematch later down the line. I've read that somewhere, and I think it's actually in Titan, one of those books. It would have been Titan.
That was a work.
Yes, apparently he said it just to, again, wrestlers trying to work the boys backstage. It's very McMahon of him, if that's true.
Yeah, very.
Somewhere, the pair had worked themselves into a shoot, brother. Hart's return saw him paired off with Austin at Survivor Series with a plan for WrestleMania 13, a rematch between himself and Michaels for the title, with Hart winning this and a third and final rubber match between the two later on. At the same show of Hart's return, Michaels lost the WWF title to Psycho Sid, although he did win the title back at the Royal Rumble in Michaels' hometown at the Alamo Dome.
At the Alamo Dome!
Thank you. Well, do I have to do it or should you do it? Heckenbottom! Levesque!
Heckenbottom! Let's meet at the Alamo!
Cocaine is a hell of a drug!
Yeah. That Survivor Series, by the way, is fucking excellent.
Oh yeah, Hart and Austin in particular is fantastic. But even Sid, he's like you can see why McMahon really liked him a lot, despite him nearly killing Arn Anderson.
Lots of examples of wanker Michaels in the match as well, because obviously Sid, like MSG, it was at MSG, which is Smarktown, and hometown of WWE, really, because that was their main building, and Sid's basically cheered as the face, and you can even see that
Yes.
he's not pretending to be a heel at all, really. He's like fist bumping people, and he's like, "I'm the man," and people are like, "You the man, I'm the man." Um, Michaels is clearly like visibly pissed off that he's getting booed and that he's not getting the reaction that he should, like he thinks he should get. And then after the finish was he hits Jose Lothario with the camera, power bombs hits Jose with it, then hits Michaels with it, power bombs Michaels, and then gets the free count. And Michaels pretty much rolls out immediately after the free count to go to Jose Lothario. Then to kind of no sell it a tiny bit. I don't know if that's quite what he's doing, but it is a little bit of a no sell.
I was going to say, considering Michael's state and his actions in other matches, I wouldn't be surprised, to be brutally honest, that that's a legitimate gripe he's got. But he won the title back 2 months later in his home fucking town. In fact, the Alamo Dome, 60,000 people are recorded to have gone to that fucking show.
Yeah, but how much of that is papered and how much of that is correct?
That's absolutely right. As I said before, Wembley was the legit highest gate for the WWE. It wasn't 150 billion people turning up to see Andre get slammed by Hogan, and Andre weighed 4,000 pounds then, brother.
Never been slammed, had never been beaten.
That match is utter shit. Hart's ascent to the Mania rematch, whilst convoluted, could have worked. In the first of many times this year, Hart was screwed out of the Rumble win when an eliminated Austin ran back in and eliminated Hart, thus winning he won his first of 3 Rumbles. The plan was then for Hart to win the right to face off against Michaels at In Your House Final 4 against Austin and the other 2 men he illegally eliminated. Sid and The Undertaker have gone here, but that can't be right because Sid would have been in the match. So I don't know who the other guy is.
Vader, wasn't it?
Why the fuck wasn't he in the match? Or was it just because Sid takes preference because, like, Michaels under no circumstances wants to work with Vader?
No, wait, it is. The Final 4 main event was.
It's definitely Sid's in it, yeah.
Hart. Was it eliminate? It was 4 corners elimination.
Yeah.
Hart, Austin, Vader, and The Undertaker.
And then we get to what happens a few days before. Michaels, having won a second world title at the Rumble, had seen a doctor and was told a knee injury had ended his wrestling career. 4 days before Final 4, a teary Michaels delivered one of the most famous promos in history, saying he was retired and had lost his smile. Many believe this is utter bollocks. It had been noted that Michaels was already annoyed at losing the title to Sid in November, but to then lose it again 2 months later and to a rival was even worse. Although the medical report is legitimate, apparently the diagnosis that caused this was that he had a lack of ACL in his knee, which he always had, and for some reason this was now the straw that broke the camel's back. So Shawn lost his smile.
But it's basically because he was told he would be dropping the belt to Brett at WrestleMania 13.
Yeah, even though the plan was always going to be to have 3 matches. Hart has to win the second one for the rubber match to mean anything, and you win the rubber match.
Okay, so Vince loses. So at the moment, Vince has got Brett as his champion again.
Yep.
And he's lost his desired main event. So he makes Brett drop it on Raw to Sid.
The following night from Final 4. Yep. One day.
And then he obviously goes with Taker as the number 1 contender.
Yes.
And he just builds more on the whole Austin kind of double turn. The using Brett as the wily old veteran to build Austin.
Yes, exactly that. And for Taker to win at WrestleMania the title, because up until this point, Taker had always been seen as McMahon's new Andre, where he doesn't really need the title at all. He's more of like a sideshow attraction to get in, like, for marquee value. But this was literally a case of, he's been here for fucking years. His last title reign was back in 1991. It's been 6 years. Let's give him the belt and see what we can do with it.
His first title reign lasted a week.
Yes, it was to sell. It was literally a case of, will people buy a pay-per-view with 6 days' notice?
this Tuesday in Texas.
Let's repeat it 700 times in the pay-per-view just to get the point across.
That's a really bad pay-per-view, actually.
What, Tuesday in Texas or Survivor Series 91?
Tuesday in Texas, because it had what was supposed to be the blow-off between Savage and Jake, which ended up being a bit rubbish.
Yep. And then you've got Hogan throwing the ashes into Taker's face.
Yeah, cheating, biggest babyface they had, cheating to win. Whereas, always stuff like that always annoyed me.
Hogan is a cunt and water is wet. Michaels, after receiving more positive diagnosis from other doctors, made his in-ring return to action. I say action because despite retiring, Michael spent a large portion of promo times on Raw still bollocking Hart for sacrificing his family life and whinging about not getting what he wanted.
I was going to say, actually, yeah. So WrestleMania 13 rolls around, and Michaels comes out. Didn't he guest commentate? He guest commentated on the main event,
Yes,
didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
To beat Sid, and he comes out beforehand, doing his. He did his entrance where he's jumping around, did his lean muscle flex.
I think he's a big phony, Reece. This guy's a big phony.
Hey, you're a great big phony. Yeah, he basically is showing the boys that, yeah, you know what, I'm fine, and I just didn't want to work this fucking event, so fuck you. And all the while, Vince is on commentary, oh, look at him, look at this, look at the
star rating.
What a maneuver! Yeah, these all things that when you're a kid you don't really know, because obviously, when you're a young boy in London, you haven't got the Observer or.
When you're 9 years old, wrestling is fake, but you think that these are professionals.
Yeah,
telling a story.
that's what rekindled my big love of wrestling, because I think same as you, there was a time when we both stopped watching it for a very long period of time, and it was really the access to not so much backstage, but just the politics of it and the way the business works and how this happens and why this person gets this, that actually, even to this day, makes me really still interested in wrestling.
Spoiling all my questions towards the end of this fucking thing. Hart didn't help matters. He spent a lot of his promo time, including this program with Austin, blasting Michaels for his injury not being real, which, if we believe Michaels, is now where the rivalry went personal. Michaels struck back, first complaining for a promo between the two, which believed Hart purposely sabotaged. This is the one where he kicks Hart in a wheelchair, where he delays what he's supposed to say. And one where he insinuated that Hart was having an affair with Sunny, which was not true. In fact, it was Michaels having the affair, which resulted in the pair having a fight backstage at a house show, Michaels having his hair torn out of his head and demanding a release to go to WCW with his friends, which Vince refused.
I like the descriptions of that fight, actually, because basically Hart kicks the shit out of him.
Yes, he does. Look, no disrespect, but Bret Hart has spent a lot of time getting, strapped up by his own dad in the dungeon. He knows how to legitimate wrestle, and Michaels, for most of his career, gets into scraps backstage, sometimes with Marines.
Yeah.
And he just gets the absolute shit kicked out of him.
Well, there's a reason why he used to associate himself with the big lads. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. Despite this, the plan was still for the pair to enter a program, first at King of the Ring, which was then turned to Summerslam, but the legit hatred between the two caused numerous issues. The pair did finally cross paths somewhat at SummerSlam 1997. Hart won his then record 5th WWF title from The Undertaker thanks to an accidental chair shot by Michaels. Hart, now a tweener thanks to his bout with Austin at Mania and his anti-American stance, would spend his then unknown final months as a world champion.
That was another good event, actually, WrestleMania 97.
I'm actually gutted because the original plan for this whole retrospective was we go through various pay-per-views leading up to Montreal, but because of time constraints, we've had to focus on the one episode. But SummerSlam 97 is fantastic. If you've never gone and seen it, see it. It's just brilliant from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And it also has that $1 million challenge, which I was so looking forward to talking about, but I never had the chance. Unbeknownst to him, his contract had become a contentious issue, not just to Michaels, but the WWF's future. In 1997, McMahon announced the WWF would become a publicly traded company, but every financial advisor told McMahon to eliminate any long-standing financial commitments to make the company more viable for shareholders. such as a 20-year multi-million-dollar contract to an employee. McMahon, who according to some had already gotten buyer's remorse on the deal as early as November 1996, now had another reason to get rid of Hart. Between Michaels' complaints and having spent the last year lambasting Hart on commentary, mentioning his age whenever he could and whether he still had it, and of course booking him to be utterly despised in America, he now wanted rid of Hart, telling him that he wouldn't be able to fulfill his side of the deal. His exact words were the WWF was in financial peril and that he should seek whether WCW could still do a similar offer to the past year. Which is something Brett, I mean, obviously that's later on when he does the secret recording, but, financial peril. But he's planning to go public.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Bischoff still could. Although the NWO was over a year long into its storyline, Ted Turner had approached him to create another WCW program which would become Thunder, although originally it would either be a rival NWO program or Nitro would be rebranded NWO Nitro against WCW Thunder. What was Bischoff's what did Bischoff arrogantly say about this?
Didn't he say that he wanted the Monday Night Wars or whatever to basically be between the NWO and WCW and completely eliminate WWF?
Yes, he said he wanted to be in charge of the number one wrestling organization in America and number two. Bischoff, seeing the potential harm of cannibalizing his roster, which was probably more hindsight than McMahon had in 2002 when he did his own brand split, decided Hart could lead one of the shows and was more than happy to offer Hart a similar deal. Hart, who still didn't want to leave and even contemplated a pay cut, asked McMahon about his long-term plans for him, to which he barely had anything, although McMahon definitely had plans in 1998, no major ones involved Hart. With that and some minor gripes with the WWF's general direction, mainly its transition to what would become the Attitude Era, Hart reluctantly signed for WCW in a deal worth more than the previous one, at $3 million a year, and his final month in the WWF would begin.
But Harry,
yes, go on.
Still got the world title.
But thanks to some negotiating by WWF Canadian president Carl DeMarco in 1996, Hart was afforded reasonable creative control in his final month of employment. This should have played a crucial role because all storylines had led to the much vaulted match between himself and Michaels at Survivor Series in Montreal, and it's here I've put machinations. I think that's right. It's where the Screwjob actually does begin.
Yes.
Here we go, folks. It's what you've been waiting for. The original plan for Survivor Series, what was it, Reece? It's quite obvious.
Well, Michaels to win.
Yeah, exactly.
Drop the belt in the only country, well, apart from Italy and Germany, where he was always huge, where he was obviously the hero.
Yeah, he's like the Pope. I think we have to oversell the fact of how much Hart was loved in Canada at this point. Canada. This goes well with guacamole.
Yeah, he's clearly a Canadian treasure. So yeah.
You've been to Canada. Is it true?
I've been to Canada, quite a lot of Canada. Yeah, I've been to Calgary quite a lot, and although it's not like he's got portraits of him on the streets like Stalin or Kim Jong-il, one of the ice hockey teams in Canada is called the Hitmen, and they play in black and pink. And the Hart, my mother-in-law, who's from Calgary, knows nothing about professional wrestling. But when I said to her, "Where's the Hart House?" she was like, "Oh, the Hart House, I know where that is."
Cool, Jesus.
Yeah, it's a thing. Bret Hart is probably one of the most famous people. Well, he's the most famous person to come from Calgary, for example. Canada in general, yeah, he's a pretty big deal.
He's definitely the most famous pro wrestler.
Oh, almost certainly.
Yeah. According to Hart and several others who confirmed it, he did approach Michaels on October 12th. This is where Hart really comes into play because he always writes down bloody dates for his autobiography. Again, you should read it if you've not. And said if Vince asked him, that being Michaels, to put him over, he would, if he knew Michaels would do the same. Naturally, Michaels said he wouldn't, which led to the decision by Hart that he wouldn't lose to Michaels at all, though he later relented and changed that to just Canada.
How stupid is that?
I know. He could have. I mean, Michaels will prove in this entire thing that he is willing to lie. Why didn't he just lie at this point?
Yeah.
It's just fucking dumb. McMahon was keen to have Hart drop the title at Survivor Series, not only as having a non-employee have the title, but the chance it would show up in WCW. Despite pulling the same stunt with Flair and the WCW World title in 1991, McMahon had a similar problem when his out-of-contract women's champion, Alundra Blaze, signed for WCW and threw her title in the bin on Monday Nitro. Although Bischoff contends that ongoing lawsuits between the two companies prevented this from happening, this was something McMahon was adamant couldn't happen with his world title. So Alundra Blaze is technically responsible for everything that happens.
And Vince McMahon is.
Yeah, of course. I mean, again, he did the same shit with Flair back in '91.
He did it with Flair. I mean, it was Flair's idea in the at the start of that, but yeah, he went with it.
That, and technically Flair was owed his deposit back for putting money on the belt, which they didn't pay him.
25 grand, I think it was back then. The old NWA 20 grand, and that was a silly money back.
That's '91 money, so you probably inflate that 5 times.
I think the WCW belt was something like 25 or 50 grand that he had to put down to have the belt.
Yeah, and he said, "I've got it here. Like, do you want me to bring it on television?" And McMahon, he's not even got a contract at this point. And McMahon's like, "Yeah, of course, yeah, we'll throw it on television."
Well, like Jim Herd basically told Flair he had no future.
You're gonna take the Spartacus gimmick, Flair, and you're gonna take a pay cut and like it.
Spartacus gimmick, pay cut, and
get an earring in your ear. That would be a heel.
You're too old to main event. And so he rang Vince up and went, "I'm available in a couple of weeks. I've still got this belt. What do you want to do?"
We'll get Bobby Heenan on television and cut one of the best moments of '90.
The real world champion.
I love that. It's so awesome. After weeks of backing and forthing, including Hart offering to drop the title before Survivor Series and spare us this entire mess. Yep, we could have actually avoided this if they just let him drop the title.
Wasn't there a house show in Detroit or something?
There was Raws as well before. Yeah. That's what's so funny about it. The match was still booked up until the Sunday. Earlier in October, in a meeting between Michaels, Hart and McMahon to decide the match, McMahon asked Hart what he wanted, and Hart said he wanted to leave with his head up high, didn't want to be bollocked on his way out like Hogan and Savage, and, you know, when he did the Huckster, the Nacho Man.
Yep.
And others, and wanted to say goodbye on Raw, explain his character, and then relinquish the title. McMahon, happy with this, booked Survivor Series as a schmoz, which saw DX and the Hart Foundation battle each other, ending the match in a no contest. Hart would then lose to Michaels later in the month, and Hart would start at WCW on December 5th, not before saying goodbye on his final appearance.
Yeah.
On the Friday before Survivor Series, news began leaking that Hart had signed for WCW, and McMahon, having never really been happy with the prospect of Survivor Series to begin with, asked for opinions. He was terrified that on Monday Nitro following Survivor Series, Bischoff would reveal his acquisition and kill the WWF. It's here where 3 people can take credit for either giving Vince the idea of screwing Brett or confirming to him that it was a good idea. Who are those 3 people, Reece?
Oh, there's more than 3 names in this situation, but I know Cornette.
Cornette is one. Old Corny apparently raised the idea as early as the Wednesday before Survivor Series. Going frustrated, as he only can, with the meeting's lack of progress and sick of the drama between all parties, Cornette asked why McMahon simply didn't screw Hart to get his belt back. In his own words, accidentally giving Vince the impetus of a screw job.
Yeah. Okay. So Corny, isn't there the thing, like Cornette always tells the story really good? It's like, doesn't he basically say, "Vince, why are you letting this guy screw you? Just take the fucking belt off him without him knowing."
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to find it. That's just because I've rushed to get this fucking research done.
He's taking the fucking piss out of you, Vince.
Get me a fucking Wendy's burger, motherfucker. Thank you. Fuck you. Bye.
Where's my fucking Dairy Queen, you ugly cunt?
Corny, I love you, baby.
Oh, I don't.
But you're on about Omega. Anyway, that's one.
Well, Triple H is obviously credited with it. So is he?
Who's that? Who?
Triple H.
Ah, yes. In a phone call between Michaels and McMahon, McMahon asked for Michaels' opinion of the finish of the match. Whilst Michaels was hesitant, it's here Triple H cemented it himself by saying, "Maybe I'm not supposed to be talking here, and maybe I'm out of line, but fuck that. What kind of business is that? Who in the world says I don't want to drop the belt? If he doesn't want to do business, then we need to do business for him."
Yeah.
This actually helps Vince because obviously Corny and Triple H are like very opposing sides of wrestling, and yet they've both come to the same conclusion that we need to screw him out if you want to fucking get your belt back.
Yep. And I'm going to guess the third one is, I think Russo has probably taken a lot of credit for it.
Ding, 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 we have a winner. Resident snake oil salesman Russo had a finger in the pie of the screw job, apparently going as far to suggest to McMahon to have Michaels apply the sharpshooter to Hart and call for the bell. It's probably bollocks, but it's funny. After Michaels agreed to follow McMahon on whatever he wanted doing, the screw job was set, albeit with a few absent names, namely Hart, obviously, Hart's friends, the entire roster, Pat Patterson, who's a friend of Hart, and Jim Ross, who was head of talent, whose career would likely end if he was found to be involved in it.
I believe I don't like the whole sharpshooter finish thing. I think that may have come. There may have been. I think Pat Patterson may have been involved in that because obviously Pat Patterson was the guy that set out the matches. So obviously
Yes.
he's the agent or whatever for these matches. So Hart and Michaels had to sit with Patterson and go through what the match would be.
I've actually got that on here, man. Don't worry.
I'm not sure if it was that. I'm not sure if it was Patterson that came up with the idea, or it was Patterson that made sure that the actual execution of
It's.
that move. Yeah,
I was going to get to it, but it is Patterson.
yeah,
In Michael's own words, and I'm going to paraphrase it, it's Hart and Patterson accidentally created their own mafia hit by suggesting a spot where Michaels applies the sharpshooter, which Hart would reverse. It was here that Gerald Briscoe suggested to McMahon that they would call for a submission and declare Michaels the winner. Match referee and future Canadian pariah Earl Hebner was told on the Sunday, although when is up for debate. Michaels himself said Earl was told on the Sunday afternoon, although Hebner himself said it was 10 minutes before the match. Both accounts revealed the same two details. It was Gerald Briscoe who told him, and it was after Hebner had already swore to Hart on his children's lives that he wouldn't screw him and that he'd rather be fired.
yeah. And if there was any inkling that he's going to get screwed, that he'd tell him immediately.
Yes, although Briscoe basically countered as well when he was like, "We got you marked up, and we'll know the moment you say anything, you won't have to come to work tomorrow." I don't know why he sounds like that. I can usually do Briscoe quite well. Man.
Mr. McMahon.
Mr. McMahon. There we go. Briscoe had one final task, which was to teach Michael some legit wrestling moves in case Hart would attempt to fight him in the aftermath. Both McMahon and Briscoe were aware of Hart's actual shoot skills and were adamant to prepare Michaels. Also, the plan was for McMahon to take all the heat and for Michaels to say he knew absolutely nothing about the screw job.
I swear to God, as God is my witness, Brett, I had no idea what was going on.
Got it covered. So the match. You've seen the match.
Oh, hundreds of times, probably.
From a wrestling perspective, what do you think of the match?
It's dog shit.
Oh, I'm glad you've said that. So we get 10 minutes of pre-bell brawling.
It basically is walk and brawl, schmoz to the outside, where they potato each other a fair amount, and most of it is Hart beating up Michaels.
Exactly. The match is notable for Michaels' desecration of the Canadian flag before.
Yeah, which did he get a fine for that?
I don't know, man. That shit would not fly in this day and age.
Well, Jericho got fined, didn't he, for doing it to the Brazilian flag when he was there?
Yeah. That's about a decade later, though. That's the thing. Everyone's a bit more sensitive now about flags. Whereas Michael's like picks his nose with it, wipes his crotch with it, bangs it,
Yeah.
uses a towel. The whitewashing of the homophobic aspects of the storyline, which is what we've preluded to earlier. The fact that some fans did boo Hart and chanted "You sold out." That McMahon appeared at ringside to witness what was happening, which would have been strange, but explained that he was there to stop any possible fights between the two. So the match is pretty shit. And then we get to the ending, which is where wrestling changes forever. The pay-per-view ends abruptly. Hart, younger brother Owen, Bulldog and Neidhart storm the ring, and as evidenced on Wrestling with Shadows, Hart proceeded to smash any piece of equipment not tied down and let fans in attendance know where he was by signaling WCW and thank them. I also forgot to mention that at the very end of the match where he spits the world's biggest loogie at Vince right in his face.
Well, it is actually disgusting.
It's like gag reflex. Like, oh Jesus, man, don't fucking do that.
The actual event, the actual point of the screw job is always, whenever I watch it now, you can just see like Hebner's face, like you can see as Michaels puts him in the sharpshooter, you can just see Hebner just like so obviously scared. He like immediately stands up, kind of quivers about, rings the bell, and just legs it. And obviously it's probably muted now, but there's the old audio of you can clearly hear Vince shout, ring the bell, ring the fucking bell.
And Mark's Yeardley, or whatever his name is, the timekeeper is like, what the fuck, this ain't what the heck happening. Oh fuck, I can't ring the bell, ding ding.
Yeah, and obviously Michaels is pretending to be surprised, but the thing is that everyone's there, even Triple H is there. Michaels pretends to be surprised, pretends to shout at Vince, and I think it was Hunter who tells him to go get the belt. He gets the belt.
Yes, he nearly walked out without having it, which was the whole point of this in the first place.
There was that really, there's always that really annoying bit actually where true colours come through. Where just before he hits the curtain, he jumps up with the belt in his hands and he kind of like celebrates just before he's like a second before he leaves the arena. And like you watch that and you're just like, yep, basically 95 to probably early 2000s, Shawn Michaels is just a cunt, and you know he obviously had a big part to play in all this, and that's why with Shadows is interesting as he pleads his ignorance to it all. And as you said, Hart, it's the close-ups of Hart's face as he's like, because the bell goes, he's got him in the loose sharpshooter, then like Michaels kind of flops away, and like Michaels is on his front. Sorry, Hart's on his front. He's just looking confused, and there's obviously that look on his face where it's like, "Fucking hell, they did it. They actually did it."
Yeah, and it's funny because he spent the entire weekend being told by everyone. Vader said, "Don't pin him. Don't get pinned down for too long. Get out one. Don't ever go in a submission hold." But because McMahon and Michaels had such a good meeting where they basically cleared the air, he felt more susceptible to doing things.
Yeah, and he, as you said, he gets up and puts both his hands on the ropes, and he just absolutely hocks an absolute spitball right in Vince's eye, like even to the point where he uses the ropes to launch it at him.
Exactly. It's standard definition, but it's still big enough to be visible on the television
I
monitor.
think you could read his lips where he says something along the lines of "you fucking motherfucker" or "you bastard" or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
They obviously get out of there, and and Hart smashes the equipment up and does his WCW stuff.
That wasn't on broadcast, so that was only shown on Wrestling with Shadows because it just cuts early, but it is interesting.
WWE have used that footage since, I do believe.
Yes, they. I was going to get into Wrestling with Shadows later on, but they did give permission to the filmmaker to do it simply because when Vince was basically like, "Oh, you're not going to use it," even though I've signed a contract saying it's fine, WCW offered to pay off their lawsuit to get the footage on Turner's broadcasting movies, whatever that was, TNT.
Yeah,
And
TNT.
Vince was like, "Please don't put it on Turner. I'll sign the waiver, and it can go on. You can get your footage as long as it doesn't go on Turner." So we mentioned Hebner earlier, who basically escaped the moment the match ended to his hotel room. He was terrified that he was going to be murdered in his car. Despite having no part, McMahon ordered security to escort Ross to his office and not let anyone in. McMahon himself barricaded himself in his office, although Hart immediately went there and proceeded to try and break a bolted steel door to no avail. It was Sergeant Slaughter that ripped down all the signs pointing to McMahon's office, but obviously Brett had been there earlier and memorised where it was.
Yep.
Very silly. Hart and Michael's first encounter after the match was captured for Wrestling with Shadows. Hart flatly asked him if he was involved, to which, with some hilarity in hindsight, Michael swore to God he didn't, to which Hart said he would judge his actions on Raw, which I will cover after this. Despite Hart's earlier attempts at reaching Vince, it was The Undertaker who finally forced McMahon out to face Hart and explain himself. The de facto locker room leader banged on McMahon's door to force Briscoe to open it, and explained to McMahon he needed to explain himself to Hart and the boys or face a revolt. McMahon, faced with insurrection and knowing he was right, went to face the man he screwed. Their confrontation naturally ended in fisticuffs, not at first, but as Hart had just finished showering and Bulldog had stolen his towel. Do you know this whole exchange where Hart's just having a shower and then Bulldog and Neidhart are basically having to play relay, saying like he's in the locker room. He's like, "I'm getting showered." He's like, he's not going to leave until you go, and he says he fucking wants to leave. And he's like, he's not going to leave.
It's basically along the lines of if McMahon is still out there when I get out of the shower, I'm going to punch him. He has to know that if he is still there when I exit this room, I will punch him in the face, and he knows it, and he
It's
walks
actually
out
he
and he
even
punches
gave
him.
him more time. He does that, and then he says, "Right, I'm going to get dressed, and if he's still there, once I've got dressed, I'm then going to knock him out." And Brett purposely takes the longest amount of time. He doesn't wear a shirt, but he puts pants, puts his jeans, puts his shoes, ties his shoelaces. He's waiting for him to go, but McMahon won't leave, and you know why? It's because he wants him to prove a point. He wants to say,
Yeah,
I'm the boss, and I'm prepared to stand up for my credentials just because I need to be in charge of this. And Hart's like, "Oh fuck, I guess I will because I've told everyone I'm going to punch him, so I guess I have to punch him." So he gets one punch in, where he knocks him out. It's actually apparently one of the best punches ever, seen by those who saw it.
Apparently, he lifted him off his feet.
Yes, and it's here where either McMahon rolled onto his ankle, crashing down and sprained it, or Briscoe in the fracas stepped on it. Hart also broke his hand delivering the punch, but felt satisfied and knew he would only get one shot against him. And there's one final note: a confrontation again caught on Wrestling with Shadows between Julie Hart and Triple H. The latter denies any involvement, to which Julie retorts that he would be judged. And to this date, Triple H has married the boss's daughter and is heir apparent to the WWE. So yeah, God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, she's really Canadian. He's like,
God will judge you.
Hunter, you know what you did, Hunter.
I swear, Julie, I don't know.
Don't swear to me. You swear to God, Hunter.
I swear to God, I didn't do anything. Oh God! The following night, whilst Bischoff gleefully said Hart was a knockout kind of guy and had the NWO recite "Oh Canada," the WWF's revolt fizzled to Foley and Sonny missing Raw. Hart watched with no bemusement with Michael sauntered down and explained his victory with the age of a midget dressed up as Hart.
Didn't Davey Boy pay to have his contract cancelled?
He said he got injured in the brawl, and that basically sped up his contract release, where he would end up getting nearly crippled with the Ultimate Warrior, but we'll capture that one day in another retrospective.
Sure, he'd lost money to have it cancelled.
He might have, but he definitely did. I don't want to say sued them, but he said something that he was definitely injured in the breakup between McMahon and Hart. So he might have used any money he gained from that to maybe buy out his contract. McMahon's brand of damage control culminated in a now famous quote of "Brett screwed Brett." Somehow, McMahon believed this line of action would get the crowd to support him, but all it did was draw more support for Brett's inevitable debut at WCW and the foundations for McMahon's eventual on-screen persona as the evil boss of the WWF, Mr. McMahon. And it's here that we cover the fallout of Montreal. So, Screwjob. It's a fucking mess, isn't it, man?
It is, but it's just one of those really great stories.
This is, as you exactly say, this is one of those things where if you're a fair weather wrestling fan, or if you started to fade out of the product, this is the type of thing that would probably draw you back in, which is, I think, what did happen for a lot of people. But also, it did open up the can of worms of shit. They're not really professionals at all, and they really do hate each other in some aspects.
Yeah, and people are getting screwed.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, and I know we've mentioned dirt sheets a few times. I believe that this is still Meltzer's biggest ever read. I think this is the most read Observer newsletter of all time.
Well, he didn't have much competition back then. Obviously, he never had wrestling podcasts and shows dedicated to the backstage shenanigans. It was literally himself and maybe Torch.
Well, yeah, but you've exactly proven why it's a big deal that 1997, he would have been printing them out and mailing them out. There was no email. He wasn't emailing, or you couldn't sign up on the website. So after this happened, he started shifting. He always claims that he's. I think he has two issues, part 1 and part 2, that go over the Screwjob. I think I sent them to you as prep for this episode a long time ago, so you probably haven't read them.
Sorry.
Yeah, those. I think one or both of those issues are his biggest ever in terms of people read them. I think it was a really big thing for dirt sheets in general because it probably created the buzz because everyone wanted to know what happened in that really weird looking finish. And yeah, it's certainly something still interesting enough that we're discussing it 20 years after the fact.
Exactly that. Let's go through our principal players and what happened to them post Screwjob up until WrestleMania 17. So, despite many believing Hart to be the final nail in the coffin for the WWF, the opposite happened with even more shocking twists. Hart did arrive in WCW, making his debut on an episode of Nitro as a cog in the machine of the ongoing NWO storyline. Hart himself was announced as a special enforcer for a match at Starrcade between Eric Bischoff and Larry Zbyszko for control of Monday Nitro. His non-complete cause ending in January, so that's why he didn't wrestle on that show.
Yep.
Hart revealed he was a WCW guy and then got involved in the main event between Hogan and Sting, where he stopped Hogan from winning from either a botch or politicking by wrestling's biggest spinster. I really wanted us to go through Starrcade 97, but obviously we've not done it. But
well, we can do it in December.
Hey, okay.
This will be our New Year's episode.
There we go. There you go. Spoilers, folks. Starrcade 1997 should have been the crowning achievement for WCW, but instead served as the beginning of the end of the company. Hart spent his first 2 years chasing the US title whilst lost in the never-ending war between WCW and the NWO before suffering a groin injury in March 1999 and leaving in spectacular fashion by tricking world champion Goldberg into delivering a spear with a metal plate hidden underneath a hockey jersey. That was a good angle.
It was a good angle, but that's where his career ended, with that super kick that gave him the really bad
That's
concussion.
later in the year, man.
Yeah, but I mean that's the feud. That's the program.
That's the prologue to it.
Mm.
In May, Hart's younger brother Owen, who stayed with the WWF due to his contract, was killed on pay-per-view during a stunt gun run. Hart returned in September, despite contemplating retirement, winning the WCW World title twice before a botched kick, there you go, by Goldberg at Starrcade 1999 left Hart severely injured with a concussion. Despite continuing to wrestle into January 2000, Hart vacated the title and made one final appearance in WCW during an interview in September 2000 before being released, like so many in WCW, by FedEx due to injury. Hart's WCW run. Obviously, I mean, I was kind of fading out of WCW at this point. Like the whole I'll flip back and forth had kind of ended in 1998, very late. Did you watch? Was you still watching WCW at this point?
Yeah, I used to watch one and tape the other, and I used to watch WCW and tape Raw.
Oh, jeez.
And this was up until, I don't even know when I made the switch. I think
WCW eventually ended up on Bravo, didn't it, for its final rough year?
and Channel 5,
And Channel, oh god, with the Batman special effects.
Batman special
Bang!
effects. Yeah,
Zing! Russo!
yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say I've never been a WCW mark.
You did ring up and ask why pay-per-views. Can I tell this story? Where you basically, obviously in this country, we had WWF pay-per-views at 1 o'clock on Sky Sports. You tape it, you watch it. WCW didn't have that luxury. You had Nitro and Thunder back to back on a Friday, no pay-per-views. In fact, the closest we ever got was when they repeated the Goldberg DDP, match on that episode of Nitro.
Halloween Havoc '98.
Exactly. Now, when did you ring up and ask Turner?
No, I rang up Sky.
Yeah, go on.
And I got my mum, I think, to ring up Sky and ask. I think it might have been for, it might have been for a 1998 event. It might have been either Starrcade '98 with Goldberg and Nash, or it might have been Halloween Havoc '98. But I remember I was so engrossed in WCW at that time that when they kept saying oh my god, this Sunday, oh god, I used to be like, well, how the fuck can I watch it? There used to be a time in '99 where, remember old Sky used to have loads of the foreign speaking channels that just randomly towards the end
Yeah, that's right.
pick up like Italian channels and
The
German
ones that
channels.
get complaints about Ofcom because the programs are not suitable for.
So in '99, that one of the German channels used to show the pay-per-views quite a lot. So I used to sit there and watch them in German commentary. That's the wall, brother. Yeah, sit and watch them in German sometimes, but then obviously I think my interest in WCW waned around '99.
Would you say it was because of lack of pay-per-views, or just because the product
Oh,
was getting
oh
roosterized?
I used to buy the WCW magazine from the local corner
Did you
shop.
get the tapes? Because they did release them in this country back in Woolworths when that was a thing.
The first tapes they released were Spring Stampede and Uncensored
I thought you were
99.
going to say 2000, then Spring Stampede.
99 or 2000? No, it's 99 because it's the Spring Stampede where DDP wins his first world title in the four-way.
Oh, strange choice. I mean, DDP was good then, though.
And it was the 99 Uncensored with the First Blood barbed wire cage match between Flair and Hogan, where Flair gets juice after about 10 minutes and they turn it into a pinfall.
I've read that. I've never seen it. I've read it in depth at WCW. It's like, shit, we've got to rebook the match. What's this happening?
Yeah, that was also the event where Nash beat Rey Mysterio after he let Rey Mysterio get a sneaky.
That's it. Wasn't this because they took the mask off him And it's like, well, Ray, you're going to be a bigger star now because masks don't sell. He beat Nash once and then proceeded to like job him out forever.
We could probably do an episode based on that whole fuckery.
WCW is so magic. It's so fucking bad.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'd say from '97 onwards, I was definitely. I think '97, the kickoff of the Attitude Era. '98, obviously with Austin. Yeah, I was much more a WWE fan, WWF fan at the time, and WCW had certainly waned. And I do remember being incredibly disappointed with what Bret Hart did in WCW.
That's what I was trying to get to. I was like, so because you saw his run, how bad was it? Because I remember seeing the Benoit match with him. You know, the tribute for Owen, which I really liked. I remember the plate, which was just before that, and I remember some NWO 2000 shit towards the end of it, with him, Jarrett, Nash, basically pissing about for months.
He was in an NWO. I think
Yeah, he was. He was in NWO 2000. It was NWO 2000.
the silver one.
Or what? Yeah, whichever fucking one it was. It was the end of two. Yeah.
That was when you had the NWO Hollywood, NWO Wolfpack.
Oh god! And then it was.
I remember being really annoyed by the NWO Wolfpack, but they were a bit of a pop culture.
I
thing
really liked it, but maybe because it was like Sting's in red, and that looks cool. And they're like, they've got gangster rap, or not the gangster. They got rap.
An odd tweener thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Hart. I always think that Hart's WCW run is just so just a non-event, really.
Yeah. I think they wanted him in WCW just to say we have him, not saying why. So what are you going to do? And it's like, I don't know, we got him.
The thing is, as well, is that with him, that really opened up the Canadian market for him. You know, if you think about WCW, you think of like the Carolinas and the South. Yeah. That was the old Crockett territory. You know, that's what it came from. And obviously, in the Monday Night Wars, they were seen by a lot more people, but they always used to do their they were still, that was their base. And with Hart, they did go to Canada because you might remember, I believe that the steel plate under the
was
hockey
in Canada,
jersey, I
because
think it's in Toronto. He's wearing a Maple Leafs jersey.
because Hart was heel at the time, but he was obviously given his hero's reception because it's in fucking Canada. And Goldberg, despite being a face and like the most over guy in the company, was heel.
Yeah,
they knew what they were going to get into, but
so I just think that they could have didn't have to hot shot him to the belt. You could have had a really good storyline where he could have gone for the WCW World Title and been healed out of it, similar to how not so much Goldberg, but the Sting storyline, which he wasn't cheated out of anything because he was just a vigilante, but certainly a kind of a road to whatever to get his belt and to become a two-time heavyweight, or WCW and WWF champion. He's in like an elite group of people, blah blah blah. But no, it was kind of like, oh look, Bret Hart's here. He did some silly things, like where he did that thing where he basically spoke up about how much he respected El Dandy.
Sounded very flat, and this was before his stroke. Who are you to question?
He said it was all a big rib anyway, but it's kind of like, well, it's kind of, I kind of compare it to when Goldberg eventually turned up in WWF, and instead of being this monster, he had Goldberg's wig on after a week or two. Sorry, Goldust's wig, and it kind of just immediately drained it.
Yeah, exactly. They had it again, similar thing. We've got him, and it's like, so what are you going to do with him? It's like,
I don't think Bischoff ever had plans for him. I think the plan was just to get him away from Vince and have the scalp.
As I said, he was going to put him as the lead of one of the programs for a brand split, because even he was like, I can't have my wrestlers on two different shows. One's 3 hours and one's 2 hours, because people just get fucking sick of them after 6 months because they'll be repeating the same matches. Similar to what happened with the Invasion, because it was just
but obviously from that initial plan to when he actually got Hart, he'd already done the kind of sold out pay-per-views, which were all NWO
exactly.
run.
And they did NWO Nitro just before Starrcade 97 anyway, which was
right. And he had done the NWO Nitros as a kind of pilot or like a backdoor pilot. And sold outs always used to be really quite awful, and they used to
Yeah,
do really high rates. And the NWO Nitro, I seem to recall, did a really poor number.
it did. It didn't lose against Raw, but it was enough for them to go right. This ain't gonna fucking work. We'll just keep two separate. We'll keep them as
Yeah, but yeah, I
entities.
don't have any real good memory. I think the only good memory, as you mentioned, is the Owen tribute match he had with Benoit.
That's sad. We're now covering Shawn Michaels, who has a much shorter run. A back injury from landing on a casket during a match with The Undertaker at the Royal Rumble caused Michaels to retire from wrestling, not before putting over Austin at WrestleMania 14 and kickstarting the Attitude Era.
Good story, which stems from Montreal WrestleMania 14. Who was at gorilla position, waiting to forcibly make sure
Our
he gave up the belt?
friend The Undertaker taping his fists.
Seriously, if you're Michaels and you see the Undertaker standing there taping his fists, giving you a look, basically saying you don't do the job, I'm going to fuck you up, then you do the job, right?
Exactly. No, there's a story as well, just going back to Montreal, where Michaels goes up to Undertaker, I think maybe the first Raw afterwards, and he's trying to explain himself, and Taker's like, "Don't worry, it's cool. You had to do what you had to do." And Michaels is like, "Oh, thank God, I'm so glad you understand." But he doesn't know that Taker had actually spoken to Hart before, and he basically
Yeah.
rings Hart back and says, "The little cunt knew everything about the screw job." Just playing it cool. Taker is like, I'm such a big fucking fan of him, and the fact. I mean, this is one of the things that cements him, just because of his backstage. He's the policeman. I know people have said like wrestlers' cult is so fucking derogatory and stuff, especially if you're on the receiving end of it. But there needs to be a guy in charge of that fucking locker room, because at that point, especially in the '90s, where it was just like fucking hell for leather, they're rock stars. They're not fucking sports stars. And
It's Roman now.
it is Roman. Fair fucks to him. I think it's a lot safer now, though. I think they're more concerned about when the next video game's coming out. But I'd rather have that than everyone like getting coke bloat and trying to get like
Yeah,
hookers in.
I mean, two things from Roman's reign as the locker room man. He's made. Was it he made the Miz? The Miz was banished from changing room for some reason. I can't remember what it was.
Right?
And
You mean Taker?
no, I think Reigns has banished the Miz from the dressing room as well.
No, not recently. He's only been in charge since Taker left.
No, he's been locker room for quite a while. Taker's been in 4 locker rooms in the last 4 years,
No,
5 years.
yeah, but Miz was. You're thinking of when Miz ate the chicken on Benoit's bag. That was like would have been when he first
There's another one.
started.
There's another one since then.
What was that?
No idea, but the Miz had to get changed
I
outside for a
I
while.
know for a fact Reigns kicked or basically said to Enzo, "You have to get off the bus
Yeah,
because
and he also
you're getting on
kicked
our
out.
nerves and it's going to cause a fight." And he also did apologise to the whole locker room when he got busted for Roy's and said this is unacceptable. And people were like, "Oh, fair fucks." At least he's basically said he's done goofed. We've got to our third man, McMahon, who had hoped the whole thing would just blow over with his interview, and he ended up becoming the biggest heel in his own company despite not being a wrestler. He served as the perfect foil to Austin's blue-collar worker and subsequently stayed in the role for years. Coupled together with a more grittier, more adult product, the WWF went leaps and bounds, and in April 1998, a proposed match between himself and Austin on Raw ended Nitro's 83-week winning streak before WWF began to pull away entirely in late 1998. In 1999, McMahon won the Royal Rumble and eventually the WWF Championship from future son-in-law Triple H. Outside of wrestling, the WWF succeeded on the stock market to the point that when both WCW and ECW closed up shop in 2001, McMahon bought both for pittance and created a monopoly for himself, which continues to this day. So all in all, McMahon was right to screw him.
The price he paid for WCW was so low that Jericho says that he could have afforded to buy it.
It was less than $3 million, and the only thing he got really, he got obviously the talent, but he wanted the tape library, which has paid dividends in retrospect.
Really big tape library when you consider, I believe it included all of the Crockett stuff as well.
Yes, it did, because Jim Crockett Promotions was bought by Turner, and then it was bought by him. Which is fucking scary to think about, because, I mean, as we say on the WWE Network, the content is there, and that's what the primary selling point should be. You've got all this retrospective material, which is available on one platform.
As mentioned earlier, there's a great deal of WCW pay-per-views that I haven't seen. And when I first got the network, what was the first major thing that I watched? I watched big WCW pay-per-views.
And I went through stuff I missed in WWF, but I've still got all that WCW, a lot of WCW to go. Where we go. In June 2002, Hart was involved in a motorcycle accident and suffered a stroke as a result of it, suffering total left side paralysis, which took months to recover. To this day, Hart still suffers from symptoms, including his criticised monotone delivery, which is common with stroke victims. Have you seen that? I know it's even raised to this day where Hart, they say like, oh, he doesn't have any emotion in his promos. The guy had a fucking stroke. He's lucky to be alive as well. So it's like, no wonder he can. He can't. I'm sorry that he can't do a Laurence Olivier and like fucking pronunciate.
I don't think people's gripe these days, because I mean, a lot of people do tend to have gripes with a gripe with Hart these days. I don't think it's mainly due to that. I think it's more just he can come across as bitter. And for example, never says a good word about Triple H. Now, I'm no huge Triple H fan, but he pretty much slags him and Stephanie and everyone else off
4
at
out of
every
10.
turn.
It's never been in a match better than 4 out of 10.
Yeah, there's a lot of like things, odd little bits and pieces. And as you said, I think his book opened the eyes of a lot of people on the true character of Bret Hart. Not sorry, not the true character. That's a bit too much. But
No, I think you're right. His actual personality. I mean, I didn't know Hart had affairs throughout his entire marriage and was with all the ring rats.
lots of affairs. Yeah. The steroids, Davy Boy and Dynamite Kid basically talked him into putting a needle in his ass to get that. He never. I don't think it ever did him any favors, but he did that. Not that I give a shit about the steroid stuff.
No, I mean it's not wrestling's not a legitimate sport, but I mean there is health repercussions with it, but it's not to gain physical, what's the word I'm looking for? I was going to say attributes, but it's not. It's not to have a physical advantage over your competitor because it's a fixed
It's
sport.
literally to puff you out a bit.
Yeah, exactly. But I agree. Reading Hart's autobiography, I went from a massive fan from the DVD set to reading his autobiography, and I was like, "Oh fuck, man! He's not a flawed protagonist. He just comes across as very self-important and moany, which is a real shame. It's very similar, ironically, to Chris Jericho's autobiographies, where you read it. I mean, before going into it, I was like, oh, Jericho's one of the greatest ever. And then you read his biography, and it's like, he's not flawed. He's just so fucking annoying, especially when he talks about Fozzy. It will
And
never get
Jesus.
over, Jericho. Let it go.
Yeah. I mean, just to say, I really enjoyed the book.
Oh, I did as well. Apart from Death of WCW, it's probably the second best wrestling book ever.
I do like those Titan books, but there's a great deal of
Copy
basically
paste.
all of the stuff is just basically from Meltzer.
Yes, exactly, and from other autobiographies as well. It's not. I mean, they're not. It's nothing new if you've never read them, but they are worth. If you've never seen them, folks, it's all 3 Titan books by. I'd have to bring up his name there. Titan Screw, Titan Sinking, and Titan Shattered. They're all great to read if you've have any inkling for backstage knowledge. Where are we? Michaels' 2002 was far different. After getting married and finding Jesus, Michaels made a shocking return to the now rechristened WWE. Originally a one-shot deal against Triple H, Michaels won the world title at Survivor Series 2002, which was obviously 5 years after the infamous Montreal Screwjob.
Was that the first ever Elimination Chamber?
It is, and it is a great match.
A great match.
Although Michaels wears those brand pants, and what the fuck was he thinking? Although he did wrestle in jeans in the. Have you ever seen the match against Triple H at SummerSlam 2002? It's like a bloodbath as well.
Wrestled in jeans because that has to put over the fact that it's an unsanctioned match.
Oh well, I'm glad you've pointed that out. In 2003, Michaels finally confirmed that he was actually involved in the screw job, although heavily implied it was only revealed this late on. Previously, many still believe Michaels not clued in, which I find hard to believe, but there you go. In 2005, one of the WWE's greatest DVD sets, Bret Hitman Hart, The Best There Is, The Best There Was, and The Best There Ever Will Be, was released to much acclaim, also showing Hart and McMahon reconciling. The same couldn't be said for Hart and Michaels, however. In 2006, actually, before I go, did you get that DVD set? Because I do have it, and it's the only wrestling DVD I've ever owned.
No, I borrowed it off you.
So what did you think of it?
Yeah, it's good. I'm a big fan of Bret Hart's wrestling style. I always have been, always will be. Um, I think he's one of the best at putting together a story within a match, and that's something in wrestling that I value. So yeah, I've always been a big
I
fan.
have to admit, I only really got into him after the screw job. Um,
Mm,
I do find his technical prowess. I was more, flash brawl, like Taker and Austin were doing in the Attitude Era.
yeah,
But I did appreciate his match against Benoit, as we've mentioned before in the Benoit retrospective. And watching
mm,
that DVD set, it was like, Jesus Christ, he was really ahead of his time with a lot of his technical prowess. Obviously, there's Flair, who was light years ahead of most people in the 80s. But Hart himself, if you've never seen, I mean, the documentary itself is available on the WWE Network now, and obviously every match is available on there as well. But they are great. It's a great watch. In 2006, Hart was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, but didn't make an appearance at WrestleMania 22, as to avoid Michaels, who was busy facing, you guessed it, McMahon in a street fight. It's weird how all these are connected to each other.
yeah.
Hart made his first televised appearance on Raw in nearly a decade in July 2007 for Mr. McMahon Appreciation Night, the infamous angle that was scrapped due to the Benoit murders. More fucking syncing up with previous things. In
Mhm.
2009, Hart, despite saying earlier in the year that he would never forgive Michaels, indicated he would now forgive Michaels. Hart was signed to a WWE contract in late 2009 for 4 months and made his first in-ring appearance on Raw in 12 years. His first action, call out Michaels and offer a hand. Whilst Michaels teased possibly turning on Hart and even revealing he wouldn't change the night, they buried the hatchet and shook hands and even embraced. Did you see this?
Yeah, I did. It was something I. It was one of the first Raws I'd watched in a long time, and I thought it was quite good because I think when you watch it, even now, wrestling has a habit of being very hammy,
Yeah.
uh, and I do actually. I mean, they could have. Chances are they did all of the main things backstage, shook hands backstage, and then when did like this angle out in front of everyone. But Michael's Michael's at this moment just he looks as though he's genuinely going to cry, uh, and he looks as though when they do shake hands, he is genuinely pleased and honoured that this has happened and that they can put it behind them. Obviously, they went on to do a DVD set,
I was
didn't they?
going to
About
get to that as well. I was going to say as well, I mentioned before, Michael's fan Jesus, and I know a lot of people will say, oh, it's, some people even think it's like a fucking hoax. But he does seem incredibly, it must be like a really convincing performance because he seems deeply uncomfortable with a lot of his previous actions, as we'll get to that DVD as well, including that. But he does seem, I mean, there's photos, we're going to get to that as well, WrestleMania 26, where the two are backstage, and they seem like you'd never guess that they're, bitter rivals and they've had such, animosity between the two. They're both fucking smiling and seem happy with one another.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that think that the whole Michael's find God thing is just a convenient way for him to ignore the fact that he was a cunt for 20 years. But
I think again, I do think he has shown remorse in certain actions.
you're if you're a Christian, if you're a big Christian, would you have allowed the WWE to do that big whole angle when it was Shane
Oh,
and
God
Vince
versus God.
calling God? Where's God, Sean? I thought God was here. I
If you were told, however, that this is going to be the guy who's basically Satan incarnate will get his comeuppance at the end.
he always gets his
That's
comeuppance
what I
though,
mean.
doesn't
That's
he?
what makes McMahon such a good heel, and that's what separates him from Stephanie because he's prepared to take he's prepared to take all the shit. Well, she won't.
Well, she got put for a table at Mania.
Oh yeah, McMahon would have fell off the fucking stage and would have been carted out, blood pissing out of him, going like. "Ugh."
Ronda Rousey armbarred.
Oh God, I'm not looking for. Anyway, we'll talk about that when that inevitably happens on the real episode. Of course, Hart's contract led to a match, and of course, himself and McMahon had a no holds barred match at Mania 26, where, despite paying off the entire Hart family, McMahon lost via submission. The match is a difficult watch, but considering McMahon isn't a wrestler and Hart's previous health conditions, it's as good as can be. We we saw this.
The sharpshooter he puts on is so
I,
bad.
to be honest, man, his considering Hart and his thing, I'm surprised that match was even allowed to go ahead. But
Yeah.
we saw that WrestleMania.
Is that the night when Taker beat Batista?
No, it's the other one. Michaels himself had also had a unique Mania 26. 2 years previous, he retired Ric Flair, then stole the show at Mania 25 against The Undertaker, but Mania 26 proved to be his final, as of now, in-ring competition, again losing to Taker and bowing out of wrestling. So that's what the reason we watched WrestleMania 26 was not because of really Hart and McMahon, but it was the fact that they had this great match before, Undertaker and Michaels, and apparently this is Michaels' final appearance. And obviously the streak is still on the line because that was a thing still then.
Well, we used to do it, didn't we? We used to watch for I think it was about 3 or 4 years in a row. We used to watch.
We didn't see 25, but that looked shit. In fact, it was only Michaels and Undertaker that saved that show because you had Orton and Triple H.
I remember one where was it Cena beat Michaels.
That's 23.
Please win, Michaels. Please win.
They can't keep having Cena win. Look, listen to that crowd.
Yeah.
The Screwjob itself was repeated several times in several companies. In 1998, The Rock won his first WWF title at Survivor Series against Mankind in an exact replication, albeit worked.
Yeah, Sarah, it was the year, and it was the first year, wasn't it?
In 1999, WCW used the same finish for the aforementioned Hart-Goldberg match, with Hart playing Michaels, Goldberg playing Hart, and Piper playing Hebner.
I didn't realise that.
Yes, basically Hart puts him in the sharpshooter, and Piper just calls for the bell. And then we get all the other screw jobs. The WWE called No Way Out 2003, which was a rematch between Hogan and The Rock. That was Montreal Screwjob 2, even though that didn't have a submission finish. It was basically McMahon comes out, gives a chair to Rock, and then Rock beats him and then technically screws Hogan, which leads to their match at WrestleMania 19.
Oh yeah, that was another bloody affair.
Fucking Dark Age. Backlash 2004, which has Shawn Michaels puts Benoit in the sharpshooter in Edmonton, Canada. And then Earl Hebner's rush into the ring, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, it's Earl Hebner! We've seen this before, folks." But obviously, Benoit wins that match. This was one I've recently watched. Saturday Night's Main Event in 2006, which sees a match between Michaels and Shane McMahon. I'd actually recommend it. It's a really good match. Vince knocks out referee Mike Chioda, and Shane puts Michaels in the sharpshooter, and then McMahon screams at the timekeeper to ring the fucking bell. Or doesn't say fucking me, just says ring the bell. So Shane technically beats Michaels by submission. Another one, there's loads of them, fucking man. What is it? WWE Breaking Point, which is between CM Punk and The Undertaker. Taker puts the Hell's Gate on. He gets declared the winner. And then I think it's Teddy Long. He comes out and orders the match to continue because the hold was previously banned by Vicky Guerrero.
That's not a screw job.
They fucking said it was. This is what I mean. It's kind of vague as to it. There was obviously the major one, or the biggest one, which is CM Punk, who threatens he's going to walk out the WWE in 2011 at Money in the Bank. He says he's going to win the title and walk out, and then Laurinaitis and McMahon come out and they're like, "This looks fucking bad." Cena's like, "No, don't interfere. I need to win this on my own." Gets GTS'd, and Punk wins, and then McMahon's like, "Oh shit, get Alberto out here. Get him out here now." Alberto tries to run out to cash in his Money in the Bank, gets knocked out immediately, and then CM Punk escapes through Chicago crowd, blows a kiss, and fucks off with the belt. Apparently he's left the WWE. That's one of my favourite matches ever if you've never seen it before.
Oh yeah, it's great.
And then of course we have oh god, I'm gonna have to read this verbatim. It's TNA's reenactment. So, here we go. It can only be bad if it's TNA. So I'll read this from Pro Wrestling Wiki. On the January 21st, 2010 episode of TNA Impact, TNA World Champion AJ Styles defeated Kurt Angle when Styles put Angle in the ankle lock submission hold and referee Earl Hebner called for the bell. Angle then spat at Hulk Hogan, who was in position at ringside, in the same way that Bret Hart spat at Vince McMahon. Because TNA taped their shows and pay-per-views in Orlando, Florida, this match has been dubbed the Orlando Screwjob by fans. A week later, Hebner told Hogan in regards to both the Montreal Screwjob and his latest Screwjob that Bret didn't screw Bret, Vince didn't screw Bret, Shawn didn't screw Bret, but Hebner screwed Bret, as well as Angle, for all the money. Fuck's sake. And that's, that'll be it. I think that's it for now. Thankfully. So, that's the Montreal Screwjob, folks.
Yeah,
It's a mess.
not a great deal to talk about.
Well, we've got I might as well ask for your has your opinion changed on it? Or let me ask you first of all, when did you first hear about the screw job?
1997.
Was it when Hart went to WCW?
Yeah.
I first heard of it when Austin defended the WWF title at Unforgiven 98 against Dude Love, and they kept talking about, oh, is McMahon going to screw Austin out of the title? And then Jim Ross has to do the staged apology where he's like, I apologize for insinuating that McMahon would screw Austin. And then they cut at the end and they say, did you get all that? And McMahon's in the office with Ross going like, you buffer. And then
Mm,
obviously, I was still little then and I didn't understand what the fuck. I mean, I just thought Hart was like another WWE guy in WCW. It was just one of those things. I didn't realize he actually left the company on such bad terms.
yeah.
Like, what was your first opinions on it? Did you think, oh shit, McMahon was totally in the wrong? He should not have done it. They should have come up with a better way, or was it the right call considering all that was fucking happening? Like, what do you think?
I just think that the way wrestling was in 1997, the things that has preceded it in terms of like Flair and Alundra Blaze and all of that stuff, I do actually I do subscribe to the idea that Vince probably felt as though he had to do it, and I probably quite understand it to a degree. I felt for years that Hart was hard done by and that he was screwed. I think he was quite. I don't think he was very flexible about it. I understand the whole creative control thing. I mean, Hogan's the one. Hogan in WCW, when it comes to creative control, that causes a lot of problems, and it caused a lot of problems for Hogan and WCW later on with their kind of like kayfabe defying shoot things with Jarrett and Bash at the Beach
The
'99 and
Russo
what.
shit.
Yeah, the Russo stuff. Oh, Bash at the Beach 2000, I think it was.
Mm.
Anyway, at the time of it happening, I thought uh, it was terrible of WWF to do that to Bret Hart. Now I kind of, you've had 20 years to read everyone's side of the story, and you can see how they got to that conclusion. And yeah, I think I kind of side a little bit with Cornette in a way, where it just kind of like it's your fucking company, it's your fucking belt. You say what happens to it. Um, creative control and whatnot meant that was a bit difficult. But yeah, I mean, what do you feel?
Um, by the time I learnt about it, I was already kind of smartened up as such. Like I was actually reading backstage gossip. So reading up on it, immediate instinct is Hart is the good guy in this. There's no question about it. There must have been a way. But when you actually read about the contract side of things and the business side, where McMahon really did feel like his company, it was do or die if they went public, and he obviously did in his heart believe that Michaels was the future of the company. And then in late '97, I mean, he was still kind of unsure about Austin, but he was like he did have his plans and Hart wasn't amongst them. Would I have? I mean, this was a question I was going to get to. What would you have done if you were Vince McMahon? You're told Hart is leaving. He's got a guaranteed contract at WCW. He's your world champion. The match you've booked is currently him and Michaels at Survivor Series, and he's refusing to lose. What do you do?
I would have had him lose at the house shows before the Survivor Series.
What if you were indecisive up until the Sunday, and it's still booked?
Then I probably would have screwed him out of it.
See, I would have thought I'm exactly the same. I would have had him lose before. Had it been the Sunday, I would have had him come out and then explain that Hart has signed to a rival wrestling company and as such has been stripped of the WWF title. And the match tonight between Michaels and whoever the fuck ever, Ken Shamrock, Austin, whatever, will be for the WWF title. Have Michaels still win that because obviously he's got the most heat and he's the most hated, and the Canadian crowd will still love it, and then just go plan ahead. The problem with that, obviously, is that we don't get the Vince McMahon character out of it, and then wrestling dies in 2001 when WCW's incompetency kills that company, and the WF dies because they have no attitude era.
Yeah, but Hart would have vetoed that with his creative control.
Reasonable creative control, man. And this is the problem with Bash as you go, Bash the Beach. What exactly is reasonable creative control? Like, what defines reasonable? I mean, is it reasonable for a guy who's leaving the company and there's no interest in the company to still say, I'm not refusing to blow? And it's like, you're not here in December when we're now having to pick up the pieces from you going.
Well,
It's a fucking mess.
sounds of it, reasonable creative control in wrestling means that you have to sign off on the finish of your match.
This is something that Hogan's proven. This is something wrestlers should simply not have.
Hmm.
I mean, the whole law of wrestling is that if you're leaving, you go out on your back.
Yeah.
But obviously, the animosity between these two in his heart of hearts was like, I'm not losing to Michaels at all, under no circumstances. I mean, to be fair, he said he was prepared to put over Austin, Shamrock, basically anyone, as long as it wasn't Michaels.
It sounds like Shamrock was the next option that they could have done.
It's so weird because Shamrock, he's there in '98 and he's a big player for the mid card scene, but '99 that heel turn and his fucking push finishes, and then he's nowhere to be seen forever.
Mm.
But that's another story. I've got one final question. Do
Yeah.
you think a screw job of this caliber would ever happen again in the West?
No.
No. And is that purely because there's too much backstage knowledge now for your average wrestling fan?
Yeah, I also think that it's been kayfabed enough. Like they've done so many kayfabe screw jobs that you genuinely probably, I think people wouldn't believe it.
I was going to say you've actually raised. I know you wanted to raise this as well, so I'll ask. Wrestlers who think it's a work, or everyone who thinks it's a work.
Oh, the conspiracy! Every year when the debate comes along and it's like another year gone, there's always some kind of Bleacher Report or What Culture article where we can prove that the Montreal Screwjob was a work, and I don't think it is. I think it's clearly a shoot, and it was clearly a screw job. The main thing, I mean, what I think the main conspiracy theory is that it was a work, and that the preceding years where Hart went to WCW and put in was quite lackluster, and then obviously Russo went over a few years later and effectively destroyed them with booking. That that they were agents of McMahon, and that it was all work. Kevin Nash kind of subscribes to. He doesn't. I don't think not all of the stuff I just mentioned, but he did mention a thing in a shoot interview I watched a little while ago, where in Wrestling with Shadows when he comes out of the dressing room after being punched by
Yeah,
Hart, and he's really selling it. He's like really holding his
it's
face.
because
He's
he's
like limping. His
concussed. It's because he's just woken up from being knocked out.
says Nash always says that bit of footage always makes him think that was a work because he knows Vince and he knows what a control freak Vince is, and that Vince would have never allowed himself to be in that position where he would be filmed.
Again, I think that's the case of it being a happy accident that there was a film crew there filming a third-party documentary, and he couldn't have control over it. And when he did try to exert control over it, he was told, "Well, you've signed a contract, so there's nothing you can do."
Do I think it was a work? No. Uh, do do I find those conspiracy theories interesting? Yes.
Absolutely. Again, it adds another layer to it, and it's one of the reasons why we're still talking about it to this day.
And we will always talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. In 10 years' time, there'll be more shit coming out of the woodwork. They'll probably say like, oh, Neidhart knew something about it, or it was a work.
Yeah.
We all got worked. It's the most elaborate work in the history of wrestling.
Wow, that's a very detailed account of before, during, and after the Montreal
This is
Screwjob.
what happens, folks, when your original plan is we'll do several episodes and we can do them in about an hour each, and we have to compact them like corned beef in one episode.
Delicious corned beef.
Muscular and compact like corned beef.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Similar to the Benoit episode we did, a different approach, not really a review as such, more just
A bit by bit, point by point analysis.
and yeah, I think we'll do something similar, like we mentioned earlier, for maybe Starrcade '97 as a little New Year's treat.
Oh, that would be good.
Yes.
What should have been WCW's crowning achievement is literally the beginning of their end.
Yeah, it's an absolute turd in the punch bowl.
It's a bad show in sports. It really fucking is.
Yeah, but yeah, this has been fun. This has been episode 10 of Smarks Without
We got
Attitude.
to 10. We've got 10, and our audio quality's gone up, and our episodes are getting longer. But next time it'll be.
Can't say we're not committed to this hobby.
Oh, fuck no.
But yeah, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We're back to normal next time with oh Christ, Survivor Series this year.
Brand
But
warfare.
AJ and Lesnar.
Yeah, if Brock squashes him, I'm done.
Oh, don't say that. We could have more episodes.
Maybe.
And Jinder's going against Triple H on tour in India, so it looks like he's out of the title picture. So it's possible Styles might be there.
Sounds like Triple H is taking a bullet for
I bet Vince was like, Hunter, I like this Styles guy. He's gonna have the title. I owe you one, pal.
I'm kind of hoping he holds it for a little while. He's probably going to lose it at Mania to someone, but you know.
Yeah, no, I can live with that. Depending on who Styles loses it to, if it's back to Mahal again, then it completely ignore this. It's fucking redundant. But if he holds it to Mania and it's a credible challenge and a well-booked feud, like all wrestling, that's all I fucking want, folks.
I still think it'll be Jinder v Cena.
I don't know. I think they might have put the Skadoodle on there, but then again, it's like, who's Mahal facing at Mania?
Probably Cena, because that's who he's been campaigning
They
for.
could just repeat the feud with him and Rusev, evil foreigner versus super Americana Cena. Doesn't need a title.
They do, and I think it will probably have the title attached. That'll be Cena's last big one.
Pray to mighty Zunu, please don't be that.
But you never know. We'll probably be referencing these predictions in a future episode.
Considering our previous track record, Corbin's going to headline. He's going to win the WWE title.
My prediction that Corbin wins the Rumble is still doable.
My predictions are terrible. Corbin will win the WWE title. Emma must obviously have a career ahead of her. And Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn obviously have major career upswings in their direction. They'll probably get fucking released on Monday just to rub it in. Anyway, folks.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, guys. Hope you've enjoyed it. It was a blast to do the research on this.
Yeah.
It's nice to do a retrospective where there's actually kind of a happy ending to it as well, compared to the Benoit one where it's just fucking misery after misery. This, at least, there's a reconciliation. Everyone gets what they want, which is to sell merch. So, yeah, all good.
Yeah. Yeah, episode 10 in the books. As always, you can find stuff of ours on iTunes and Apple Podcasts if you just search Smarks Without Attitude, YouTube. We're on Twitter, SWA_podcast. You might see that I did some live tweeting of a Rev Pro show the other day. One tweet of which, featuring Tetsuya Naito and Bushi, has received over 120 likes from Japanese people.
Any of our Japanese fans listening to this, I don't know what thank you is. I've watched enough anime and my mind's gone blank. I was about to say sayonara, but that's hilariously wrong.
Hello, isn't it?
What's that?
Arigato is...
Arigato is...
Arigato.
Hello, Mr. Robot. I don't know. I'm going through racist songs to try and fucking figure it out.
Anyway, yeah, so... we've done some tweets, got some likes, all the stuff. So yeah, find us on there. And yeah, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you soon.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.